Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me Philip Quaintrell. Now, Philip is a best-selling author. Some of his um, series include the Echoes Saga, The Time of the Dragons, the Ranger Archives, and the Terran Cycle. And I was reading on your bio on your website, and you said that the first book of the Echoes Saga was written because you had science fiction writer's block. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was writing the second book in my sci-fi series. One day I just stopped. I couldn't write another sentence. I don't know what happened. It was horrible because I loved writing. I just got to this one section. I was like, nope, don't know what to do, don't know how to write that. And obviously at that point you put the story down, but if you love writing, you just need to keep writing. And I'd seen somewhere, I can't remember which author said it, but they said the best thing to cure writer's block is to write something completely different. Even if it's like a paragraph or a page or another book, just move away and do something different and then come back to it, just like keeping the wheels greased. And I'd wanted to delve into the fantasy genre. But when I started writing The Rise of the Ranger, I had no intention for it to go anywhere or for anyone to read it. It was just to try and cure my writer's block. So I wrote the prologue and I just sort of fell in love with it. Like I just wrote this prologue and was like, oh, what happens next? I really want to know what happens next. I sent it to my sister-in-law and said, would you want to know what happened next, or is it just have I just done something here? And she got back to me and was like, no, I want to know what happens next. And so I ended up writing Rise of the Ranger in its entirety before I went back to the sci-fi series.
That's amazing. So normally I do this before I ask a question. So Philip, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your works.
Thanks. So I've been writing, started writing in 2013, but didn't start publishing until 16, 17. And then I went full time in 2018, and it has just been the best years of my life. I just love it. I've got, yeah, like you said, I've got three fantasy series all set in the world of Verda, and I've got a sci-fi series, The Terran Cycle, which is where I started. But I feel entrenched now in fantasy. Like it's just that's where my passion lies now. I can't seem to get out of it. I just want to write more and more. I've got more ideas, further down the line and collaborations and things. It's just really exciting. I just love it.
That's funny that that wasn't your goal. Like your goal was science fiction, and like fantasy just was kind of an accidental discovery on your part. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, I didn't mean to get into it. I think I think I might have written that prologue and then I went away and sort of like filled a notebook with ideas to sort of flesh it out a bit more. Um, and then yeah, once I got into it, I just loved it. Yeah, I mean, I think writing sci-fi is actually quite hard. It's a difficult thing to do because almost every single thing that you come across in a sci-fi book requires a lot of description for people to get their head around because it's all just so completely made up. Whereas with fantasy, to a degree, you can describe the vista, but you don't need to tell people what mountains and trees look like.
Right.
Whereas on an alien planet, you can't say there's just a forest because people are like, well, what does the forest look like on an alien planet?
Exactly. Yeah. That's amazing. So, are you going to some writing habits? Are you like an outliner, or are you just kind of free to like? It sounds like the prologue that you wrote for Rise of the Ranger was kind of just a spew on the page, basically. But then, like you said, you fleshed it out. Is that kind of your normal process, or how do you go about outlining a story?
No, I mean even Rise of the Ranger, I didn't outline. I just the doodles and notes that I made was just to help me more look into the history of the world and what parts of the world there were and like factions and things. I never actually wrote down like story ideas.
Okay.
Um, I'm a completely organic writer, really. Um, I always say my job is really easy because I don't actually have to do a lot. I just hand everything over to the character and let the characters, as long as you fill the character with real life and all the flaws and strengths and all the passions that a normal person would have, if you can conjure that person and write them as if they are completely real, then they get to make all the decisions that they would make based upon the life they've led. And then all you have to do as the writer is make sure that you follow through their actions all the way through to consequences. And it really means that I don't have to sit and look at a big whiteboard and think, I want to get to here, but I'm over here. How do I do that? I just think like the character and they work it out. And it also means that as I'm going along, I have a lot of like, yes, like those eureka moments because I things happen, and a bit like the reader as you're turning the page, it's the same for me. I write it, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So what's been, let's go on those moments. What's been the biggest surprise that you weren't expecting, and what's been the biggest like the amazing parts that you have felt? And it might not be what readers have felt.
Um, a lot of them are like early on. I remember in the Echoes Saga, um, things like what the villains' um main role was, like what they wanted, what was their desires. You I remember writing, I think it was the prologue of book two in the Echo Saga, and the bad guy, right, right at the end of the prologue, the bad guy says something that completely threw out what the good guys had planned, and it made me stop and think, oh wait, I have no idea what's the bad guy talking about? What's he after? What he's looking for something that is not what I've thought of, but I don't know what that is. And I got really excited because I was like, I don't know what that is. And so, you just keep writing, thinking like, oh, I'm going to get to it. I'm going to get to it. And then, I mean, the best, probably the one I'll always remember though, is, and I won't spoil it because this is in the last book, in A Clash of Fates, book nine. And the way that the series is set up is it's like three trilogies. So there's the thread that runs all the way through, but I wrote it so that you could read them in like these digestible chunks, but they are all connected. And I got to the very last book, and obviously there's the main antagonist that they are faced with, and it's that whole like, how do we defeat the antagonist? You built them up and built them up, and here we are at the end. And I remember sitting back in my chair and being like, I have no idea how they're going to do it. I just don't know. And for days, I struggled to write, even though I was an organic writer, not knowing that was actually quite scary because it felt like I was heading into what could ultimately just be a dead end. And one day I was having a shower, and when I have a shower, always thinking like the characters, my head just, goes off. And I suddenly started thinking like one of the main characters and thinking, what could I do? What do I need to do to solve this problem, to defeat the bad guy? And this particular character that I was thinking of has been in all the books. And he it's weird saying he because it was me. But in my head, he remembered something that he did and something that happened as far back as book three. And because he remembered that, I followed that through all the way to them using this thing as a way to defeat the bad guy. And I was in the shower and I was just like, yes, I've done it. And then, like you're coming out dripping wet and I'm like, ah, ah.
Hastily throw a towel on, and family's looking at you
I just have to
strange.
write this down really quickly. Yeah, yeah. I just loved that when I was writing book three, I didn't write this thing with the intention that it would be used in book nine, but it did. It worked out that way. And that was just a real shock, eureka moment that, yeah, will always stay with me. It helped me finish off the entire series.
That's awesome. Isn't that funny how that works sometimes? I just had an experience too because I'm writing a book. It's not out yet, but I was putting in some stuff and I was like, oh, I got to remember to foreshadow this going on. And so like I was going back to edit to read it and I was like, oh, I've already done that. Like it already foreshadows it. And I was like, oh, like
Yeah,
that's it's just amazing sometimes how like your brain works. And
yeah,
subconsciously
yeah, yeah,
it'll just program everything in there and consciously as you're writing,
yeah.
like it brings it out. It's amazing.
Yeah, sometimes I think that I think the way it all works out perfectly sometimes, the way that all the characters interact and the threads all come together, I'm always like, my subconscious must be writing this, or my subconscious must be ahead of me, planning things out, and it's just like rising to the surface as I arrive at the point at which I need to write it, because it's weird.
Yeah. And for those non-writers, if you're a non-writer watching this, um, you this might not make sense to you.
Yeah, my wife thinks I'm crazy. Like when I tell her my process and how the plot comes into being, and she's like, "You hear, you're basically talking about hearing all these voices and thinking like people that aren't you." And I have antagonist POVs in my book as well. So I'll spend like today. I spent a day writing 2,500 words, thinking like a really bad person. And then school ends, 3 o'clock, school ends, you have to stop killing people and go to school, be a dad.
Right. Totally switch gears on that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Another thing that's always funny is, you're an organic writer, and I've done both. Like I've played with doing outline and being a free writer organic. And the book I'm writing now is all organic. And it's interesting when and people who don't write don't know this, like characters will do something that you don't have planned and they'll go off in
Mm,
whatever direction that they want. And you just kind of have to follow along. And you tell people this and they're like, you're writing this. Like, how can this happen?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. I hear that a lot. Yeah. I hear that from people and they're like, what do you mean you didn't know? But that thing happened. You're the one writing it. And I'm always like, I am the one writing it, but I'm not the one making all of the decisions. Like these characters have all had they've all got their own background and history and experiences, and it's based off of those that they make the next choice. If it was me, I'd be like, I'm not getting involved in this. I'm running that way. Don't,
Right.
don't give me a sword. I don't want a sword. Um, yeah, I couldn't do that at all. So yeah, it's definitely something else. Like these characters in my head for sure. It's not me. Well,
Right.
I do think as well that if and it's not the case for everyone who's not an organic writer. I think maybe more for myself, but I know I know that if I plan too much, too busy thinking about trying to get characters from A to B, then sometimes I think the author's voice can come out a bit. Characters will make decisions that the reader will go, well, that's stupid. Why have they done that? That's a really silly thing to do. Whereas if your readers are used to your characters making these like organic decisions, they know why they make decisions the way that they do. Then actually the author's voice isn't in it, and then it's a much more immersive experience.
Right. Exactly. Um, I love Rise of the Ranger. I've read the first three books. Um, so when it came out, I don't know. I don't remember how long ago I read it, a couple years ago, but when I was interviewing indie authors, your name was always brought up as like kind of like their inspiration. Um, it
Oh
has
wow,
has
that's
it has
nice.
it kind of exceeded your expectations?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, any one who comes to me for advice on writing or just getting your books out there, I always tell them to plan for the very best thing to happen, because these books have done nothing but surprise me year after year after year. New things always coming along, new readers always coming in. Um, I was a nurse for 9 years, I think, before I transitioned to writing full time. And I imagined my entire life as a nurse, living, doing that job until I retired. Um, I could never have imagined that this is where these books would take me. Rise of the Ranger. So to start at the beginning, the sci-fi series just didn't do very well. Yeah, I found the sci-fi genre was a very hard one to push into as an indie. And I know other indies have, and they've been really successful. I just couldn't seem to break into it. Um, but 1 month after Rise of the Ranger was self-published, I was able to go full time. It was just a complete transition. I was completely blown away by the overwhelming response to it. It's literally changed my entire life.
So, what do you feel was the catalyst for that rise in growth for Rise of the Ranger? Why do you feel it was successful? Like, do you know, were you doing like a heavy marketing campaign for it, or what? What do you think? I mean, it's a great book.
So
Like,
this
it
is
should have taken off, but
no, but I mean that. So this is the bit that I know probably annoys a lot of other indies, but I have spent £0 dollars on marketing. I haven't marketed my books. I don't know what happened. I've spoken to other indies who have asked me like how did that happen so quickly back in 2017, and I've heard all sorts of wild theories about algorithms and things like that. All I know is I published Rise of the Ranger without telling a soul. Didn't even tell my wife. I literally just pressed the submit button and walked away from it. And in my head, I was like, I'll come back in about a year and check on that and see if anyone's picked it up. It probably won't be a lot. Um, and obviously, I think I managed about 6 hours before I came back and checked it. It wasn't very long. 6 hours later, I was like, I'll just have a quick look, and it had sold 4 copies, 4 ebooks in America, which isn't a lot. 4 ebooks a day isn't going to let you go full time. But to that point, with my sci-fi series, I think I hadn't sold any books in America, and I saw those 4 books go out in that 6 hours, and I was like, I wonder if that's a good thing. Like the American readership is so big, and when
right.
something sparks, when it sparks there, it sparks big. Um, and yeah, I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll take that as a good omen. I'll still come back and check on it in a year. 1 month later, I was like, I'm quitting. I'm out of here. I'm doing this full time.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's kind of a Cinderella story. Like that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. To this day, I don't. I wish I did know, just so that I could tell other authors that come to me and ask for advice, so I could tell them what I did. When actually, I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was just the space at the time, in terms of like just the lack of indies that were out there, the lack of uh, indie stories in the epic fantasy realm. I know a lot more now. I know that, like, for example, a lot of publishing houses really aren't picking up the epic fantasy books. It's not a genre they're particularly interested in, which has opened up this space for indies to fill for all those epic fantasy readers that crave those stories.
Right. Yeah. There's probably a lot of factors went into it. Timing, the type of story. Like I said, it's a wonderful book and it should have taken off. Um, but lots of times it don't take off that fast. Like, usually it's a slow burn and then all of a sudden, like 2 years after published, it takes off and you're like, well, where were these guys 2 years ago? But that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, being an indie, you're in charge of everything. I don't know, I didn't see the book in 2017 when you first published it. Has the cover changed, or did you have to? Is the cover that you went with the same cover that's now?
Oh, yeah, yeah. The covers have definitely changed. There were three. So for the first 3 books, they had completely different covers. Yeah, and those covers, uh, they weren't terrible covers. They weren't made by an illustrator. They were made by a graphic designer who was he was taking stock images and then putting it all together. which was what I could afford at the time. You know, I was putting those covers together initially off a nurse's salary. And then, you know, even after the first one was successful, I was using the same covers because of that uniformity. And then I got to book 4, and by that point, the books were doing really well. And I thought, and someone else had said to me, um, look at who you want to sell beside. So, like, you know, go onto Amazon and look at the other fantasy authors like Brandon Sanderson, and Kel Cade, who, you know, at the time she was, I think, 100% indie. And I was looking at their books, and they had great reviews and great ranking. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'd love to sell beside them and look like I belong next to them, like look like I fit in, because you don't want readers to sort of look at things like a Brandon Sanderson cover and then look at your cover, and something in the back of their head just says that's not the same quality, and they move on because you're competing against so many books.
Right.
And so I reached out to Arcade and said, who does your covers, because they're beautiful? And she said, Chris McGrath. So I immediately looked up Chris McGrath, and anyone that knows anything about Chris McGrath knows that he is just the best of illustrators. You know, he's done everything: Star Wars, Halo, Dune. You know, he's done all these amazing covers. I sent him an email. My email was, if my email had a voice, it sounded like this: "Hi, Chris. Uh, you don't know me. Uh, would you like to work with me?" You know, I was really tentative. I was like, oh, you know, I don't know how this is going to go. He's this really big, expensive illustrator that is used to working with big publishing houses. And he got back to me quite quickly and says, I've been wanting to do an epic fantasy cover for years, but no one's asked me, which again was one of those like, oh, okay, yeah, because the publishing world has sort of dropped it. And so he was quite eager to do something in the epic fantasy space. And luckily, the books were at a point where I could afford him. And since then, I've never looked back. He did 3 more covers for me. He did 4, 5, and 6, and then I had him go back and recover 1, 2, and 3. And if you look at my graph, you know, like my sales graph, you can, I think it was, I even remember the date. I think it was like the 14th of December. I can't remember the year, but it was the day that the new covers 1, 2, and 3 went out, and all 6 books matched with Chris McGrath covers. And on that day, when I relaunched it, the Rise of the Ranger and Empire of Dirt and Battle of Gods, it went like this.
Oh wow.
You know, like once I put his covers out there on top of them, they sold like 5 times as much. It was insane. And now, you know, I've become quite good friends with Chris, and we've worked together now over, I think it's 14, 15 books. And in my head, you know, Chris is sort of the guy that is illustrating Verda.
That's amazing. You know, they say don't judge a book by a cover, but people do. And even
Oh
though
yeah, 100%. I don't
yeah,
know where that saying came from. It's ridiculous.
I don't know either. But I mean, you have like visual proof on your graph. You can look at your Amazon chart and be like, oh, new covers, boom, you know, skyrocket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's a genius. Like his artwork is just. But I even remember seeing a review once. I think it was for Kingdom of Bones, and the review said something like, "I bought this just because I saw it had a Chris McGrath cover." I was like, "That's what I wanted."
That's awesome. No, and that happens. That's fantastic. So if you are an indie author, for those of you who are thinking about becoming one, pay close attention to who your cover artist is. Like you said, Philip, like who do you want it to look like, and who do you want it beside on the Amazon or Barnes and Noble shelves or wherever? Because you want it to look exactly like that. You want it to look like it belongs there. So
Yeah.
that's great advice. You talked about earlier, you know, you wrote, did you say 2,500 words today or whatever? Like, what are some of your daily habits to stay successful?
Yeah, I mean, for me, routine, maybe because I was a nurse for before this, routine is one of those things that I think I thrive with. I'm not one of these authors that requires inspiration to strike. I don't have to go out for a walk or watch something or do something and then inspiration hits me and I can suddenly write lots. I think for me, it's sort of if I'm sat down at my desk at sort of I start work at 9:30, and if I'm sat there at 9:30, I put my headphones on, I put the music on that I know relates to the scene that I'm writing, and then inspiration just sort of knows where to find me. Then I'm sat at my desk at 9:30 with my music on, computer ready, and it just comes out, and for me again that routine, and I write in the school day. I write until 3 o'clock until my kids need picking up, um, and it's almost impossible to write when the kids are at home. So I make sure that in like those sort of 6 hours ish that I have, I get 2,000 words done. Today was a good day. I've got more done today, but my standard is 2,000 words a day, Monday to Friday. It sounds very boring, and I wish it was kind of like, oh, I have to do this really cool thing, and then I'm like in the zone. Whereas actually, yeah, I find that just sitting at my desk with the right soundtrack, um, and a good cup of coffee, and it just comes out.
One of the things that I hate is that there's this mysterious muse that like inspires people. And I always like it. You are a nurse, you know this. Like when emergency happens and you're in there, like you can't wait to be inspired. Like you just have to go. And the
Yeah.
same thing with writing. Like you have to treat it like a job. Sit down, you do it 9:30, whatever time anybody else can do it. Like if you set a time every single day and sit down and write, then you will find that your productivity will grow. Like you can't wait to be inspired. Like you just have to sit down and do it. You listen to music. Some people don't. Some people, will put on a movie in the background. Like whatever. And those are triggers, right? Like I've read a lot of success books, and like there are triggers to success. Like the same time, the same place, the whatever, either music or movie or whatever background noise you need. Like set up triggers for yourself to succeed. And that sounds like you have set that up for you to succeed.
Yeah, for sure. I know as well that I work really well in the morning. So if I have meetings or phone calls, I will sort of track those for the afternoon, so that I can get a really good start on the day. The longer the day goes on, the slower I get at writing. So that morning slot is really important. So yeah, prioritizing the time, that's again something I learned as a nurse. It's just you learn where your strengths are and you play into them.
No, that's fantastic. That's great advice. So, we were kind of chatting beforehand, and you said something about a TV show. Can you tell
Yeah.
us something about that? What's
Uh,
going on?
well, the Echoes Saga has been optioned for a TV show. That's been in the works for a few years. We've been hit by delays by things like writer strikes, actor strikes, COVID. Um, there's some things going on right now with the Ranger Archives and the Time of Dragons. Uh, um, I can't really talk about those exactly. There's a couple of companies vying for Time of Dragons, and there's a specific project in mind for the Ranger Archives. It's all very exciting. It's one of those, going from book to screen is a really long process, and it's you don't just rock up at a studio, knock on the door, and say, "Here's the book, go do that." You have to make packages to sell to studios, and I have really good production companies who are on board and really passionate, and they've put some great things together. I've seen some really fantastic concept art. I know that the vision and the tone that they have for the world is really good. Um, but there's still more elements to add into the package to make it as advertising as possible, and that's still an ongoing process. And yeah, I can't really say much more than that, other than it's very exciting. I can tell you when they first reached out to me, I thought it was a joke. I get, I get emails every day from people, and I was going through them, and it was sort of like, oh, love your books, think they're really great. Are the film and TV rights still yours, or have you sold them? And I was like, I was like, thanks for liking the books. That's really lovely. More coming your way. And yes, I do still have the rights. Thanks. Bye. I didn't really think it. I remember saying to my wife, I was like, that is a really odd question to ask. And then just moved on with my life. And then, of course, they got back to me, and yeah, they were serious.
That's awesome. So what was that feeling like when you realized like they're serious and they're going to offer you this much option rights or whatever, and whatever package that you between you and
the
them, like what
the
did that feel like?
the feeling. I remember I walked out. It was summer, and I walked out the front of my house, just kind of like with my hands on my head, a bit dazed and stunned. I was a bit like, "Has that really just happened?" I don't know. And then after this like euphoric high, I then remember thinking, "Oh, I have no idea how to navigate that world and those kinds of contracts." And so it was at that point that I decided to get serious about finding an agent. I had tried to get a literary agent, years and years ago when I first started writing sci-fi. And you ask any, amateur author trying to get into it professionally and trying to get an agent, it's just a tremendous amount of rejection. It's you're sending them off and off and off and off and off, and you're hunting for new agents all the time, and you send more and more manuscripts, and it's just no, 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 no. And so I had stopped doing that because it was a bit soul crushing. Um, and then obviously I got this interest in film and TV, and I thought I haven't really got time to email and go through the submission thing again. I need an agent to help me out now. So another author who had an agent suggested Joanna Swainson to me, who's my current literary agent. And I just called her direct and said, I've got contracts for a film and TV option, and it's really thick, and I don't know what I'm doing with it. I don't understand half the language in it. And yeah, after years and years of trying to get an agent, I got one in 40 minutes, on a phone call, because I actually had something to bring that they could work with. And then they put me in touch with a TV film agent, and Mark has been on board ever since and has helped me navigate my way through these contracts. And I mean, these contracts are mad. Like I was a nurse, and then I went into a job that is just making stuff up for a living. And then I'm going through this contract, and it wants to talk to me about theme parks,
Oh,
like theme park rights and things like that. And I'm like, I'm not getting a theme park. Why is this in here?
that's
It
amazing.
was a bit, yeah.
Well, I want to bring up something that might be in the background of what you said that people might not have catched, but one thing that I think is very important is you found your agent and your cover artist by people you knew. You asked them, who do you use, who do you use. Um, so networking in this business is very vital. I know like sometimes we feel that it's lonely, sitting at a computer writing all day, but being able to make connections and being open when people ask you for advice is key to anybody's success. Um, what has been
Yeah.
some of the challenges that you have overcome by the people that you know?
Um, I mean, first of all, what I would say is, um, in by no way do we actually compete with each other. I think in a lot of industries there is that sort of natural, one company is competing with another company because they sell a similar product. Whereas what I've found, especially in the indie world, is that I am not in competition with any other author. It's actually we all help to sell each other's books. And so, offering advice to other authors is a good thing. It shouldn't be withheld, and I know that when I was first starting out, I needed advice. and couldn't find anyone and didn't know how to network with other authors at the time. And now I see, so much, there's like Ryan Carhill's books and Michael Miller's books, and Andy Pellegrin and, Jay Hayes. There's loads now. And when people read their books, their Kindle or Amazon, or they get emails, whatever, that says, check out Quaintrell's books, and then people read my books and it says, check out Carl's books or Miller's books, it's constantly like, not everyone will start with you, but they end up coming to you because we now live in this really connected network of books where, your provider is telling you about other books that people have enjoyed that have read your book. And so we all keep selling each other. It's really good. Um, in terms of like, yeah, the advice, I mean, I've had some really good advice, like I said, about, who to sell besides and that kind of thing. I'm not sure about any challenges that I've overcome. I've one of those really annoying, lucky authors that, like I said earlier, it just sort of it took off, and I didn't know why or how that happened. As time has gone on, I've had, nuggets of wisdom from authors that I've met who've said, "Oh, you should try this or you should do that," and I've always had this mindset of, "Oh, I just don't need to," but then I do try it, and it's really fun, and I sell more books in this area, or I make, I've now started working with the Broken Binding. We've got special editions and things with them, and signed copies. Those are sort of things that I'd sort of given up on, I think, as an indie, and now the the whole world is sort of changing in this industry. Indies are being taken seriously, and we have a lot of the same opportunities that the traditional authors normally would only have. We're getting TV deals, we're getting hybrid publishing deals, um, we're getting special editions and signed copies. It's all changing, and it's all because of that networking, because you're meeting other authors who are willing to tell you who to speak to and what works and what doesn't work.
Exactly. It is a very small industry to be in. Like all those names you mentioned, like I've either met or interviewed, half of them, and it's just amazing that that people like you even say yes to somebody like me who really doesn't have that much credibility, that um, don't even have a book out, but it's just been fantastic. Like Andy Pelican was one of my first interviews, and he's just a nice guy and so helpful and stuff. So it's just been fantastic. Um, who have been some of your one inspirations to write in the genre that you do, science fiction or fantasy? And then who have been some of your inspirations to help you keep going?
I'm a really this feels like fantasy author suicide, because I haven't read a lot. I haven't read, I haven't read Tolkien, I haven't read Martin or Rothfuss or Sanderson. I haven't read, all those big names that are like these sort of pillars. I just haven't read them, and I think I was intended to get round to reading them. But then when I started writing, I think I got a little scared that if I started reading their fantasy books, I would start taking things subconsciously and then spitting them out in my own books, without realizing it. You take that idea and you just sort of like reconstitute it and you put it out there, and you don't even realize that that was the source.
Hmm.
Um, the biggest one that really got me into fantasy was R.A. Salvatore. His Legend of Dritz books.
Yeah.
I remember picking those up in a bookshop in New York when I was younger, and the covers just pulled me in immediately. I was like, "What's happening there? That looks so cool. He looks like a cool character. I want to know what's going on there." And I think at the time it turned out that that was something like book 12, 13, and 14 in what I didn't realize was a massive series. And then I went back and got Homeland. And from then on, I was just like sucked in. I just needed more and more of that world and the characters. And I liked his style of writing. And just, yeah, the characters that he introduced all felt so real, and flawed and believable. And I knew that I didn't know at the time, obviously, that I was going to get into writing when I started reading. But I guess a part of my subconscious was like, that's how I should write if I get into writing. Um, and now, yeah, now I read more now, but I don't know. I probably read more sci-fi than fantasy. I don't know if it's because I'm just scared of getting into fantasy now because I'm writing it, and I don't want to, take ideas from people by accident. I recently read the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio, and I reached out to Christopher after I read Empire of Silence. I reached out to him, and I won't say
Great guy.
exactly what I said in my message to him, but I basically said that I wasn't very happy with him because of how good he is at writing. Um, those the Sunita books are just amazing. His writing style is exceptional, and every time every book I read of his, I was just like, oh gosh, this is so good. I can't believe like he's just out of nowhere just started writing these books at this level. It's brilliant. Yeah, they're a real inspiration. Just the way he writes characters is again so believable. I feel like at no point do you ever hear Christopher's voice in the stories. You just get immersed, and I think it's that immersion in books like that that pull me in, and I'm like, oh yeah, I need to write like this. I need to make sure that I'm still always writing these very grounded, believable characters that the reader can get behind and fall in love with.
Yeah, no, that's a great series. Um, and I don't know if Christopher responded to you, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, he did. He reached out and he saw the funny side of the things I was calling him, thankfully, and talked to each other a bit. But he's a really great guy.
Well, I kind of did the same thing with I don't know if you know Matthew Wolf or have heard of him or not, but I was reading his series and after I think book 3 or 4, I don't remember, something happens to one of the characters and next time I saw him I was like, "I'm gonna punch you in the mouth." Like,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I've had a few
it's
emails.
got a few emails from people doing the same thing.
Yeah. I think especially as they like finish the Echoes Saga, it's everyone loves the ending, but I think not everyone makes it. Not everyone makes it, and that upsets people. But then you think if you're upsetting people, you're doing it right.
Right.
It means that your readers are all in, and that's really what you want. And also, no, the first person to get upset about characters dying and things is the author. I've written through tears, while writing. To be fair, I think my daughter had long been born, so I wasn't sleeping much. But there are those moments that as an author, you think, oh, it's sparked a reaction in me. I hope it does the same for the reader.
No, that's fantastic, and 9 times out of 10, I'm sure it does. Um, you know, being an author, father, husband, what do you do to maintain balance? What do you do for fun?
Yeah, fun is probably on my PlayStation or Xbox. I recently have been playing a lot of Helldivers 2 with some friends from the Broken Binding. We formed like a little team. That's a great way to just like kick back and yeah, I love that. I've also got I get a lot of miniatures 3D printed from Hero Forge. I design all the characters for my books. I enjoy painting those. That's always a good time as well to like while you're painting them to sort of like get into their character as well. But again, that's still work, I suppose. Like you're still thinking, and that's another thing. You are always thinking when you're not talking to someone. Your brain is in the world of your books, and you're always like going through your character's thoughts and ideas and things. But yeah, for me, I love playing on my PlayStation. I love watching movies and TV. Um, I wish I could say I love exercise. I wish I could, just don't.
I'm not sure anybody really loves exercise. I think people say they to people, but I don't think anybody really likes it deep down. That's subconscious. That it's resisting. It's rebelling.
Yeah, I mean, I find my routine is just really good for work-life balance because obviously I don't start work until after I've dropped the kids off at school, and then I finish work in time to pick them up from school, and then I'm just around. Like I think my kids probably don't even know I have a job. You know, as they get as they get older, they'll probably be like, "What do you do?" You know, like, we never see you work.
That you'll have the case of the kids at school telling their teachers that you do something totally wrong and you have to get called in. Like, what did your dad do?
Yeah, they'll be like, "Daddy just plays on his PlayStation."
We don't see what daddy does. Yeah, that's how it's going to be. Um, so what's on the horizon for you as far as books
Right
coming out?
now, I'm 50,000 words into A Time of Dragons book three and loving it. That's really great. I'll probably have that ready Easter, early summer next year. Um, Beyond that, what I want to do is probably I'll probably write another novella in there somewhere. I released my first novella last month, and I've got this idea to write like a short series of novellas that come after the Echoes Saga, with the idea being that these novellas will kind of bridge the gap between the Echo Saga and my next big saga that I write in a few years' time when I'm finished with the Time of Dragons. But I found novellas are really fun. I'd never written a short story before, and it was a really nice thing to do in between books, just to sort of because it was a different time period to A Time of Dragons, so it was nice to jump back into other characters that I'd left behind in the Echo Saga, and just do a nice like cool little story with that whole section of the world for a while before jumping back into like a big chunky, book three.
Fantastic. That's awesome. It's always fun when you find something that you weren't really expecting to like or enjoy or just didn't have any experience with it and you turn out really liking it.
Yeah, yeah, and we've got a nice sort of special edition coming out for the novella soon, although it hasn't been advertised yet. And I'm really looking forward to seeing A Time of Dragons book two, the Endless edition that the Broken Binding are making. Um, the designs have been released, and I know that they sold out. I think they sold out the first print run in like a week.
Oh
But
wow.
I haven't seen the book yet. I'm waiting for the printers to, have them all delivered to their HQ. But I love when you see it for the first time. It's got all the gold on it and the color, and I love that. I can't wait to see all that.
No, that's exciting. It's always something to look forward to, huh?
Yeah, and I never really think I've written a book until I'm actually holding it. There's something about you write it, you release it, and the ebook goes out or the audiobook goes out. But once you're holding like that hardback or that paperback, I'm always looking at it going, "Oh, I actually wrote a book. Like it's an actual book. It's not just a theory."
Right. It's this tangible thing that you can hold and it's hefty and it's tangible and you can see it,
Yeah,
everything there.
yeah. I wrote something that I can actually smell.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the best part of a book, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The smell. So, I appreciate you coming on today. Do you have any other tips or tricks that you'd like to share? Anybody who's beginning their journey?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the honestly the best piece of advice that I ever got was from Ian W. Sainsbury, who's another author, an old friend, and he said to me, "Just keep writing." And it sounds so simple and so obvious, but there are so many times when you can get bogged down in other projects or life or rejection, with like manuscripts and things or bad reviews or any of those things that can like pull you down or pull your attention away. But if you just keep writing, the next book gets written and you get better with every book that you write. And every book that you write and release, it adds to the library that you're putting out there and it helps build and build. And the next book that you put out helps to sell the previous book that you put out. I always say that book needs a friend. And so I write the next book and then that book goes out and the month before you see the previous book spike. It's just keep writing whatever's going on. Just make sure you make time for just writing without distraction.
That's great advice. Would you mind telling people how to get a hold of you if they want to reach out on social media or whatever? And also, I don't know if you go to conventions or anything. If you are, go ahead and say if you're going to any in 2024, 2025.
I don't have any. Do I? I don't think I have any convention plan. I've only been to like two conventions, full stop. I've never really got into that circuit. I suppose I've always been quite introverted. I think in the writing. And I've been to FantasyCon, and I went to WorldCon in Glasgow this year. That was an eye opener. Like I'd never been to anything like that before. That was so much fun, and I definitely want to go again. Um, but yeah, I need to look at what's actually coming up and what's going on. I haven't got any plans right now. I tend to be a bit of a last minute convention goer. Um, but I'm easy to get hold of. I'm very accessible. My email address is in my Amazon bio, but you can also go on my website, philipcquaintrell.com, and there's a contact me on there. And you can contact me. You can private message me on Instagram or Facebook, or you can Twitter. Anything like that. I'm very accessible.
Perfect. Philip, I appreciate you getting on with me today. I learned a lot from you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.